At long last, Season 12 had arrived, and I was faced with the extremely difficult task of picking a class to start the season with. Ultimately, I would land on the Paladin. Naturally, I would name it after myself, except my name was already taken, so I cleverly spelled my own name properly, and I was now permitted to play the video game. Today, I'll be playing the Paladin on an actual ladder reset this time around. Just like last season, this is going to be hardcore solo self-found. My goal is to beat the game and take on the Ubers while hopefully not dying a horrible death. I began the journey by inflicting large-scale destruction upon the weak and the elderly. Demons. I spent the first few levels bashing things with the scepter because melee splash is entirely too good. However, my build would be entirely focused on casting Holy Bolt, which was especially effective against that bastard Rakinishu. The build was very simple. Max out Holy Bolt and its 3 synergies and stuff like 2 billion points into Vitality. Curing was simple enough for a spell-casting paladin. I would need to get as much gold as I could so I could purchase this scepter with +3 to Holy Bolt. For 25k gold, I would get an extraordinary amount of value from this item. I'm not lying when I say that. Getting plus skills would be especially important for Holy Bolt, because at level 15, it shoots 2 bolts at once, something that's very valuable for a spell that shoots in a straight line. I would have it just in time for Andariel, who mildly threatened my life for about 5 seconds before dropping a nice pair of unique heavy gloves. I wasn't a melee build, but I will very gladly take gloves with plus life and FHR. Yes, please. For all of Act 2, I went on a crusade to recover holy artifacts while leaving behind a trail of violence and destruction. This game is presumably inspired by the Middle Ages, which makes the Paladin a man of his time. I would then smash atoms into these artifacts to make the staff. Later, I used profound magics beyond my comprehension to open the way to Duriel. As usual, this would be my first true test of the build. I lined my Holy Bolts up with my mercenary and dickhead Duriel himself, and I won the altercation by a freaking landslide. There was really no other way to put it. I was feeling pretty good about the Paladin. Act 3 takes place in a forest that is gripped with terrifying Satan magic, but the solution to this problem was simple enough. I was to harvest the organs of some random dead guy. The parts were scattered throughout the map, presumably without objections from the family. I reached the council for the final piece and used profound magics beyond my comprehension to make the flail. Act 3 normal was easy enough, but I still had to fight Mephisto, and he could be a real bastard. But I was a paladin, and my resistances were entirely too high. I was able to out-heal the damage that was being inflicted towards my mercenary's face. Mephisto went down, and I proved to be the bigger bastard. Straight to hell I go. Act 4 went exactly the same way as the previous acts. The damage of Holy Bolt scaled adequately with the difficulty increase. Even Iswal managed to die horribly in a timely manner. The spell was systematically dismantling even the strongest mobs on normal difficulty. And then I systematically cheesed the game by purchasing a teleport staff on the literal first try. I hoped I wouldn't die on this paladin because I would never, ever see RNG like that again. You guys know I hate shopping. After clearing the Chaos Sanctuary, I was permitted to fight Satan himself. I don't know about you, but I think the red Diablo looks the best, even if it makes him look like a baboon's ass. I was entirely satisfied when I could out-heal the automatic death laser being applied to my mercenary's brain. Diablo went down quickly enough, but he was considerably tankier than the other bosses. But for now, hell was saved, and all the sinners could return home to their families as God intended. Anya is extremely lucky that her quest happens to give the best reward in the game. A free +10 to all res is way too good to turn down. But not even Anya's quest could compare to this Ann rune that dropped shortly after that. For a paladin and normal, this Ann rune might as well be a Burr rune, because it was the final rune I needed to make a spirit in this extremely mediocre paladin shield. I was too feeble to use it, but I had it available to me, and that alone was good enough. Then I reached the incredibly overpowered ancients, which aren't overpowered in the slightest in normal difficulty. However, I still took them seriously because I recently had an incident on another character that I'll get into later in the video. For now, I inflicted violence and brutality to Madoc and Talik in a small amount of time. The only reason Corlick didn't die faster was because he was too busy jumping around like a jackass, but they went down all the same. I reached the Bale Waves and evaporated everything that came into contact with the Holy Bolt. Even the weird dinosaur mobs went down no problem, and they're more than twice my level. I didn't even need to kite them. Then it was time for the Bale fight. Holy Bolt proved to be an effective tool of violence towards Bale, so long as he didn't keep teleporting around. Bale really needs to learn how to just die like a normal person. At some point, my brother Mercenary decided to just walk away from the fight. Where was he going? Truly a question for the scholars, but it wasn't a big deal because Bale was dead. His entire insides were rapidly transferred to the outside of his body, and I was now a destroyer of the video game. Even though normal difficulty is really easy, I was going into Nightmare feeling pretty good about the Holy Bolt Paladin. The high health mobs, such as the Minions of Destruction, and even Bale himself, went down really easily. This would be my gear going into Nightmare. As you can see, this is the most normal gear that ever normaled. I never found a soul rune, so I wasn't able to make a lore. I was level 27, which was pretty low, but Nightmare was going to fix that anyway. My resistances were in a reasonable spot. Holy Bolt was maxed, and I was working on my second synergy. I also had 1 point and a charge in Holy Shield. Surprisingly, I was just above the 75 breakpoint, which was by far the highest FCR I've ever gotten on a character that was fresh out of normal. I was decently strong going into Nightmare, but I still could have used a few levels. However, I figured I would just make a dead sprint straight to Andariel instead, and sure enough, she sprinted right back at me, spreading her toxicity just in time for the holidays. I was on my own for this fight because my mercenary's ankles had been chewed off by several Fallens. Despite my pitiful level, I was able to stand my ground and shove bolts of light down Andariel's throat, which is a perfectly normal adult thing to do. Act 2 Nightmare went exactly as well as it did in normal difficulty, but it wasn't until level 35 that I remembered, I was a paladin, and I can, run an aura. You know, the thing that paladins have. I would be running 1 point into Salvation Aura for the rest of the playthrough. I could have gone Sanctuary Aura for the magic pierce that it gives, but I wanted to max out my synergies first. The pierce simply wasn't necessary because bosses like Duriel were simply not a problem. If I was going to die to Duriel, it would have been in normal. He couldn't even kill my feeble mercenary, and then Duriel violently exploded. One can only hope to die in such a dignified manner. Act 3 was also a total pushover. There wasn't anything that could present a challenge. That was until I foolishly went to turn in Lame Essence Tome to Alcor, who proceeded to box me in like a total bastard. Getting boxed in made me feel like a dumbass. It was so bad that I had to leave the video game. Well played, Alcor. Well played. But I finished the rest of Act 3 without incident. Soon enough, I would be shoving concentrated bolts of light down Mephisto's eye sockets. The damage of Holy Bolt was still scaling adequately at this point, but Mephisto was a little tanky for this fight. I don't know if he has a resistance to magic. Eventually, I evaporated him, and his entire existence was reduced to a stone that was apparently his soul. It's time to go straight back to hell. I was very happy to see things dying in just a few hits in Act 4 Nightmare. I wanted to start the season with a build that could perhaps farm Hell Chaos Sanctuary on day 1 with relatively minimal effort. The progress I've seen so far had given me hope for that. Then I smashed Mephisto's entire existence in exchange for a possible rune, but the Forge thought I could accomplish great things with this Dull rune instead. I had truly burned all my good RNG on the Barbarian playthrough. Nightmare Chaos Sanctuary was business as usual for the Paladin. I enforced my morals and beliefs towards everyone around me, which is exactly what a Paladin was meant to do. Then I summoned the Devil once again, which I'm pretty sure is also a thing Paladins were meant to do. I had to do a little positioning, but once ground was established, I was able to stand completely still and literally hold down right-click. Diablo was a bit tanky, but he was still dying at a reasonable pace. More importantly, he couldn't kill me or the mercenary. Soon enough, Diablo went down, and good God, that was extremely loud. The bastard mystery ring could have been an SOJ, but we all know it was an Eagle ring. I'm just glad it wasn't a mantled. Early game magic find is always appreciated. Then I did the thing in order to get the thing. And I made my way to Nightmare Ancients, where I employed the clever strategy of letting my mercenary die immediately. I lacked the intelligence to properly separate Madoc and Corlick, but it was fine because all I needed to do was not die horribly to day 1 server lag. Oh, and Madoc was extra strong, which was completely horrifying. Thankfully, Charge made it incredibly easy to dodge attacks, and I killed him before he could kill me. Corlick took a while to kill because he spent most of his time leaping everywhere except on the spot where I was standing. Thankfully, he died violently. Talek rolled with Spectral Hit, which was not very threatening by itself, but I was too chicken shit to take any chances. After 2 minutes of baiting his attacks, he also went down, and I was deemed worthy by the Ancients. We're kind of setting a low bar here, but I'll take it. Then it was time for the Nightmare Bale fight. The strategy was incredibly simple. Kill him before he kills me. My Holy Bolt wasn't even doing 1,000 damage, yet this was probably the highest damage I was putting out compared to my other starters. Bale gave up on life, and I gave up on my Destroyer title because now I would be a conqueror of the video game. No human being would be surprised if I said Normal and Nightmare were very easy. For the Holy Bolt Paladin, it felt especially smooth when it came to killing the primeval bosses. But now I had arrived in Hell, and this is where the video game truly begins. I finished Nightmare difficulty as a level 52. The damage of my Holy Bolt was still a 3-digit number. My resistances were not that terrible, but still not that good. My Holy Bolt was at an agonizing level 24. It only starts to shoot 3 bolts at level 25. One of my synergies was fully maxed, and I was working on my second synergy, which was Holy Nova. I also had the 1 point into the usual 1 point skills, and I also had a point into Salvation Aura to help my resistances. This was the gear I had going into Hell, and now that I'm looking at it, I think this was literally the exact gear I had when I finished Normal. I didn't even have a Thul Rune to make Neophyte with, and I still hadn't found a Soul Rune for lore. Obviously, I needed to fix this. I jammed all 2 of my perfect topazes into a crown, and I set out to commit war crimes at the local animal farm. Nightmare Cows is a personal favorite of mine when it comes to farming some badly needed runes and gems. My gear was so degenerate that even a rare like this was a pretty hype thing for me to see. I also found approximately 500,000 of these new unique quivers and bolts. Evidently, this was the place to be for a boson. More importantly, I would end up finding some decent charm upgrades, such as this little bastard right here. I did about 30 runs of Nightmare Cows, which is a bit more than I usually do, but I still managed to pick up a few nice upgrades that would last for the rest of the video game. Even this Bariza would end up slamming with 6 sockets. It did exactly nothing for me, but it was still a pretty cool thing to see. After that, I called it good enough for the time being, because I can't be doing Nightmare Cows my whole life. Now I was level 66, and my Holy Bolt damage was now a 4-digit number. My resistances were looking much better. This was my gear going into Hell. It still wasn't perfect, but it wasn't completely degenerate like it was before. At the very least, my head wouldn't explode if it came into contact with a singular archer. I got most of my charms replaced, plenty of life and res where I could get it, and even the mercenary was looking pretty healthy. He was stuck with a rare pike for a lot longer than I would have liked. Even for hardcore solo self-found, I could have done better, but it would still be good enough for me to run straight into a fallen camp and explode everything immediately. Even those extremely toxic concentration aura packs posed no real threat to the Paladin. Things would get even better for me when the bastard video game threw a unique serpent skin armor at me. I'm definitely not going to complain if the game is just going to give me a Viper Magi. I charged directly into Andariel's torture dungeon that was made for adults. Some bastard was giving her fanaticism aura, but I took her on anyway. It was definitely not because I was too lazy to just move her or something. She still went down extremely fast. It was probably the fastest Andariel I've done on a fresh character. Act 2 is generally toxic on Hell difficulty, but my kill speed was as good as it ever was. Even the Claw Viper Temple wasn't all that bad thanks to the incredibly long range of Holy Bolt, which is fair and balanced and doesn't ever need to be changed in any way. However, Talrash's Tomb had some magic immune mobs, so I had to get a little creative here. I creatively walked away from said magic immune mobs and proceeded to beat down Duriel's door using profound magics beyond my comprehension. The lore behind Duriel is fascinating, and it all starts off with "and then he exploded." Now it was time for Act 3. Act 3, for the most part, was a total breeze for the Paladin. Even this terrifying Conqueror pack had failed to put a dent into the Paladin war machine. To make things even better, I didn't even get boxed in by Alcor this time. That, to me, is true progression. I made it all the way to Mephisto, no problem. And then I saw Conviction Aura, and that's when I decided to run away forever. But that Conviction Aura mob ran away off screen somewhere, and Mephisto was easily manipulated into fighting on my terms. I wasn't going to question it. He died forever, and it was time to go back to the Paladin's natural habitat. Nothing in Act 4 could even stand up to the Paladin, and things would get even better when I identified this fairly decent shield that gave an entire +3 to combat skills. I absolutely welcomed any gear with plus skills into my life, but then I heard a voice that said, "Slam it." The holy artifact was speaking to me, telling me I should slam everything I find, and I immediately destroyed my upgrade forever. Perhaps the Horadric Cube is not as holy as I was led to believe. Then I took my frustrations out on Mephisto's Soulstone. The forge that conveniently lets me permanently kill Mephisto would end up dropping an Rune, which was great and all, but the real thing I was looking forward to was Hell Chaos Sanctuary. This area is where magic builds can truly thrive, and the Paladin was no exception. Even the incredibly toxic Venom Lord packs would evaporate to a small amount of magic damage. This was a big deal to me because Chaos is an outstanding farming spot before getting into maps. But I wouldn't be here very long, at least for the time being, because I had to fight Diablo in his strongest form. This strategy was simple: kill him before he kills me. He was only a mild threat to my existence. Chaos Sanctuary was already farm content, and I hadn't even finished the video game yet. And then I was treated to a light show thanks to the 20 burning souls that were trying to kill me to death. Thankfully, I had max lightning res, so they were only mildly annoying. Then I rescued the random shop lady who had gotten herself into some deep shit. And then I got a shiny unique amulet to drop, which ended up being a Nokazan with some rather mediocre rolls. But I was okay with that, because this puts Declone on the menu. And then I bricked it with +1 to all skills. Declone was fucked, and now I'm starting to think maybe this holy box is actually a Satan box. Now I was on my way to Hell Ancients, and this is where I have to get serious for a moment. This video is not simply the tale of an up-and-coming paladin. It's always been about bloody revenge, because you see, this was originally going to be a Necromancer video. Unfortunately, tragedy had struck the Necromancer at Hell Ancients, which involved an invisible and teleporting Korlik. Evidently, he was cursed and extra strong. But it was no use crying over it, because that's just how online gameplay goes sometimes. I started the fight with absolute bitterness and hatred in my heart. Madoc was first, and he had the very non-life-threatening Holy Shock aura that still did a bunch of damage for some reason. Of the three ancients, Madoc will always be the vegetarian. He died to death after just a few seconds. This was the terrifying part for me, because this is the exact spot where Korlik did his invisible shenanigans against the Necro. But Korlik chose to be visible and non-glitchy like a normal person. It would be his worst mistake, and I would go on to punish him with brutality over it. He died, but I wasn't done just yet. Talik was still alive, but the good news is that his Whirlwind is nerfed in Season 12, except he rolled extra strong, and he could still instantly turn my mercenary into minced meat. I really gotta get better at reading the mods, man. But as it turned out, Talik is kind of an idiot. He is easily baited into attacking, and honestly, I can sympathize with that. The charge skill made it unbelievably easy to kite him, and I blasted away at him whenever it felt safe. I repeated this process for a few minutes until he died to death, and the ancients were down. I never have to do this toxic quest again, until I have to do it again on the next build I make. Shortly thereafter, I made it to the final fight of the campaign. It was a long journey to get here, and, well, actually, it wasn't that long, because the Paladin just smashed everything that got in his way. Even better, I was actually visibly damaging Bale with Holy Bolt, Hell Bale has as much health as a neutron star, and this usually takes me several minutes to take him down on most of my fresh characters. Holy Bolts may have its flaws in late game mapping, but it has absolutely no problem in taking down high health mobs such as Bale. The fight was finished. People could return to their destroyed livelihoods, and I was now a guardian of the video game. For 25 years, most, if not all of us, have been brutally farming these primeval bosses on several of our playthroughs. But one day, the developers asked the question, what if we took the primevals, injected them with various controlled substances, and set them loose on Tristram? It's a sickening thought, but there's treasure to be had in this incredibly dangerous setting. And what good would it do if the Paladin couldn't take down the Ubers? It was time to do some key farming. I would describe key farming as a process, but this was an opportunity for me to farm some runes in the Tower of Anxiety and Depression. I picked up a few runes like this Limb rune. I would even go on to find this Goal rune, which made key farming feel much less like a process. The final Terror key drop would also give me an Ist rune, and now I was excruciatingly close to having a Vex rune, but I was still just shy. But it was okay, because now it was time for some Arcane Sanctuary. Degeneracy was afoot. But honestly, I didn't get any game-changing drops here. This Nokazan did put Declone back on the menu, however, but I managed to gather those keys in an average amount of time. Then it was time to have my soul crushed by several thousand burning souls in the Plains of Despair. Sometimes the plains were peaceful and quiet. Other times it would be a total flustercuck. Holy crap, game, I get it. There's burning souls here. There's no need to spawn in 2,000 of them. The good news was that I managed to land a double drop for the final key set. Then I did a small crafting session and made my final gear arrangements for the Uber fight. I was level 83 and my health was looking healthy and my resistances were sufficiently overcapped for Conviction Aura and lower res. This is what my gear was looking like going into the Uber fight. My gear was largely focused on survivability, overcapping my light and cold res and getting damage reduction where I could. I can confirm that my charms absolutely existed at one point in time. It was just your basic plus life or plus res charms wherever I could get it. Also, I had to put a flawless diamond in my shield because I ended up burning all my perfect diamonds on brilliant crafted amulets. I also had a few swap pieces for some of the encounters, Black Horns for Mephisto and Venom Ward for Lilith. Holy Bolt was level 27 with all damaged synergies maxed. 1 point was put into Sanctuary Aura and 1 point into Salvation. And let me confirm to you that this is, indeed, the same scepter I purchased way back in Act 1 Normal from Akara. Was I truly going to take this degenerate level 1 weapon into Ubers? The answer was absolutely. Iswal would be the first true test of not only myself, but my mercenary's ability to tank while getting Holy Bolts shoved into his brain. Uber Iswal is generally a joke, but he does hit hard, and I could see my mercenary's health getting chunked away. I did include Holy Nova into my rotation because it's actually a solid healing spell. The fight was a slow and steady grind, but we were both alive, which meant we weren't dying horribly. Eventually, he died miserably, and the only potions I had to use were just a few mana potions. Uber Duriel will always be a bastard with his obnoxious Holy Freeze. The mercenary was able to tank fine so long as I kept smashing his brain with Holy Bolts. Duriel had caught on to my shenanigans when he started knocking my mercenary around, but a little repositioning and a lot of ADHD medication seemed to change Duriel's behavior for the better. I killed Duriel until he died, and now it was on to the final organ. There's no nice way to put it when it comes to the Matron's Den. It was absolutely toxic for the Paladin. These witches seemed to have an unreasonable amount of magic resistance, and it didn't help that my Holy Bolt was only level 27. Thankfully, the boss had spawned in a reasonable spot this time. It usually takes me like 10 minutes to find her because she's usually hidden in some obscure corner of the map. My damage was okay and things were relatively stable, but then she completely fucked over my mercenary. Even though I had given my mercenary a Venom Ward, Lilith could still inflict severe pain and depression with her poison. She also slaps really freaking hard. Things were stable until she popped another cap in my mercenary's ass. I probably could have finished her off, but I wasn't wearing Venom Ward. So I did things by the book, and she eventually died, screaming into the void, just like any healthy, sane person would. The mini Ubers were down for good. Everything up to this point had gone exceptionally well, so I was feeling pretty good about this fight. All I needed to do was not die horribly. I started creeping around Tristram in an attempt to lure one of the Ubers out. Eventually, I managed to lure Mephisto out, which was desirable, but trying to position both my mercenary and a steroided Mephisto was more difficult than I thought. Positioning would be the key to my success, and my success hinged on my mercenary's ability to survive incredible amounts of damage. Then I started losing control of the ad situation, but that was mainly because Holy Bolt fires in a straight line as opposed to being a Nova or a Chain Lightning. But for the entirety of the fight, it was the usual tank and spank with the occasional ad cleanup. Eventually, Mephisto died while screaming into the void. I won't lie, I was feeling pretty good so far. Bale was next, and I spent a good 3 minutes dodging his weird tentacles while failing to locate his actual position. And then he teleported directly on top of us, and I quickly got into the optimal position for jamming Holy Bolts into both my mercenary and Bale's brain. And then I remembered he could cast a cold wave that would knock us out of position. That was going to be a bit of a problem. I set out to reposition myself, and I started blasting away, but I was actually attacking his clone, and I wasn't even close to killing him. I had been bamboozled by early 2000s video game design. Then I came back and started blasting him again, and I got bamboozled again. Fuck. And then my mercenary got atomized when he slightly came into contact with a singular Bale wave. Things were going just a little south. I still had 2 portals left, but I wanted to use them as effectively as I could. So I spent the next 10 minutes casting Holy Bolt at max range, taking things slowly and being generally obnoxious towards Bale. The battle was hard fought, but I took him down, and I was satisfied knowing that I only had 1 Uber left to fight. Uber Diablo is infamous for having the AI of a deranged donkey, but I was mentally prepared for his behavior. However, I would very quickly discover eldritch horrors beyond my imagination. His ads were extremely resistant to magic attacks, like they have a seriously high resistance to it. My damage was tragically awful. Taking even just one of these ads down was a Herculean task. I used another portal to bring my mercenary back and restock on some potions. His assistance was absolutely necessary, though unfortunately he was still using the same Insight partisan weapon from way back in Nightmare. I don't know, I just never found an elite base. But at least it made the ads somewhat manageable this time. I lured Diablo into position and began doing the usual thing, and then my mercenary immediately died. Having the mercenary stand directly in front of Diablo was absolutely not the correct answer. I switched to Sanctuary Aura and began whittling down his ads. My plan was to get Diablo's health as low as I possibly could before using my last portal. I would only use my last portal if I absolutely needed to. This would maximize my odds of winning, but for now, I would commit an entire 30 minutes to shooting and running the hell away. Most of my time was actually spent killing his ads at a glacial pace, but I had to get the Pit Lord situation under some form of control. After several literal minutes of fighting, Diablo's health bar was well below the letter D in his name, and I thought this would be a fantastic time to bring the mercenary back out. The fight was more of the same, except I was a little tankier, and the ads were dying slightly faster. But that little boost was all I needed to bully Diablo into giving me a unique large charm along with the Black Soulstone. The fight was finally done. Good freaking god, man. I don't do the whole suspense thing with torches, so I'm just gonna ID it already. It would end up being a Necromancer torch with 51 vitality, perfect energy, and 18 all res. It wasn't a Pally torch, but I would still gladly use it for the stats. Wait a minute, a Necromancer torch? A Necromancer torch, huh? Oh, you're just so funny, game. You're just so hilarious. I had survived all the trials and tribulations that the video game could have offered me, starting from level 1 and ending at Ubers. Having done all that, can I reasonably conclude that the Holy Bolt Paladin is a good starter for this class? Oh, absolutely. It exceeded all my expectations. The campaign was absolutely a joke. However, whatever difficulty this game might offer was mostly concentrated in the Uber Bale and Diablo fights. And if I had to do this run again, I probably would have done like 50 or even 100 Chaos runs before jumping into Ubers. But it was still doable with mostly Nightmare gear. And I think that says a lot about the Holy Bolt Paladin. My plan going forward is to main a Paladin. I'm going to keep it as a Holy Bolt Paladin so I can farm Chaos, but I will eventually switch it to a Sacrifice Sanctuary Aura build. Having said all that, I would also like to say thank you all so much for the support you've shown lately. If you enjoyed the video, do consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. You'll see more of this Paladin in the future, and I also plan on doing more fresh playthroughs. I will see you all on the next one. Take care and stay safe from Corlick.